So what I'd like to talk about in this session is the camp experience is kind of a broad thing, but I'm coming from 2 years of being on Camp Family, and this year the position I'm in is Assistant Summer Director, and I'm working directly with a lot of staff who I have a really close working relationship with. So I'm really hoping to sort of develop the resources and the sort of talents that staff can offer, and just try to open up the line of communication between deans and programming staff this year. So I'd really like to be able to talk through experiences you've had working with staff, sort of brainstorm some interesting programming opportunities you've had. I have sort of a list and a guideline to go through, but rather than do that, I'd rather just hear from you, and then I can kind of guide our discussion as we go. But I'd like to open with introductions, of course. So one thing Tim mentioned last night that was kind of part of this program a little bit, but for the sake of getting us discussing off on this topic, he mentioned how our staff is going to be a little shorthanded, and we're trying to see what kind of resources your counselors can offer for interest groups and whatnot. So I'd like this discussion to sort of get into how you work with staff on evening programs, creative idea for evening programs, what you've done with interest groups or work projects, basically anything that's sort of off the scope of regular scheduled programming in terms of what you're going to be working with Amber on. So I'd really like to sort of get the conversation started, if we could, by just exploring if you've had any counselors that have led creative interest groups, or particularly if you've led interest groups that are related to worship planning, how you've incorporated your counselors. So if somebody has any experiences with that, get us started, would be great.
Okay, that's basically what we do. All of my counselors lead small groups, and it's all the stuff that is done in small groups ends up at worship, because it's 5th and 6th grade. We're geared towards sing, praise, and God show. All of our kids go on that direction. It's performing arts, basically artistic things, music, song, and so our small groups are. We do improv in small groups. We do dance in small groups. We do skits in small groups. We do. Sometimes we do poetry, depending on the interests of my counselors. I try to make. I give the counselor that has the interest that small group. If a counselor really likes improv, then they're going to do a good job in that small group. You can't just say, "Oh, hey, Bob, you hate small improv and you've never, done it before, but I'm going to have you run it," and it doesn't work that way. We've also done smaller music, drumming in small groups, and then you guys got drumming, so it was cool. So we didn't have to do that in a group, but we've done drumming in small groups. But yes, everything that we do in our small groups is what we then prepare for worship. And we have themes for every day, so that the themes go toward our theme and the worship theme, so it all sort of slides down in that general direction.
If I could run with that, as long as you mentioned that you segue into Sing Praise. Sing Praise is structured in the same way. We originally read a Bible story together, then we choose it, and then we break it into scenes and have the kids in small counselor-led groups write the scene, and that sometimes involves improvs and poetry and things like that to get something down on paper. Then we share all that together to get a sense of how the thing is going to work. Usually, some talents emerge among our counselor staff, and the counselors will then lead that. So we've had bands that were led entirely by counselors. We've actually sometimes had a band that was led by a conferee. So wherever the talent emerges, that person can lead. Alan, are you looking for our counselors to lead interest groups? Is that kind of the direction that you're going here?
Well, I think Amber can speak to what the offerings are this summer, but I think a lot of the regular resource interest group offerings will remain. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there'll still be the same offerings. We'll have sustainability, gardening, arts and crafts, nature, ceramics, and certain music ones available on specific days that we have a music person available to you. We will only probably be able to do a rotation of about 3 interest groups per group, except for some of the larger ones, which we make exceptions for, because we are going to be a little limited on staff. So while all those options are totally available to all of you, we really want to encourage your counselors to take on an interest group as well, because it just gives a little more variety for your kids and also can just kind of help them to feel a little more empowered as counselors as being a part of this group in general and just connecting with them.
One of the things that we do, or we have done, and it sounds like it'll work really well continuing to do this, is for the interest group time, we try to give some of our counselors some time off, but one of them is on with the group, and they get to kind of choose either an activity that they're really passionate about, and it's usually something more athletic, because the other things, you know, the nature and the sustainability and all that is a little more sedentary, and that's okay too. So they might have a pickup game of volleyball or soccer going on, so kids can choose that. And then the others are with, you know, we'll have a couple of counselors with the other kids going to their interest groups, and at least somebody gets some time off at that point. We just sort of rotate it through that way.
So during a pre-meeting before the summer, I'll usually have my counselors just tell me the talents that they have. So we've had things like photography or dance, or someone did spinning, like to make yarn, so the kids who want to learn about that. And also we actually had a conferee lead with the assistance of a counselor, a workshop on how to make things out of duct tape, and she had a bunch of duct tape. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it was really cool. So we kind of always tried to offer those, and I think this is really great for sustainability of the staff and kind of there's sometimes too many resources. So I'm excited to hear that things are getting parsed out a little to focus on things and the quality of it. You also wanted to know about nighttime things?
Yeah, well, does anyone else have anything related to interest groups? Then we can kind of go on to that. Adele, you do?
Yeah, and it also has to do with some nighttime things as gotcha, since we're, working on a show the entire week. We have counselors that kind of specialize in certain things, like either they're a musician or they are a choreographer or a stage manager type or set designers we have. But what we've also done is have our counselors work with every cabin. We're here in the cedar, so every room, to coordinate devotions in the morning and in the evening. And so the counselors will sit down with their group and just talk about what do we want that devotion to look like. And usually it's a sharing where all the companies share, but the counselors are coordinating that. Trying to draw the kids out to encourage them to bring a poem or share a song or something like that.
So like Missy was saying, actually, I think staff does sort of try to have as many options available as possible, and oftentimes there might be sort of not the right idea which program to pick or what fits with your conference or how to plan the arc of your week. I know a lot of people think, well, having a campfire at the end of the week seems appropriate for closing circle activities, but really staff does a lot of work to try to have all these evening programs have a different feel. They can all offer different feels. Like campfire can be a crazy shouting, like get your energy out. It can be more meditative or reflective. They can also have stories or singing songs, or it could be related to worship planning even. And so one thing I wanted to talk about was maybe your experiences with evening programs, particularly how they fit within your week, or how you see the available evening programs fitting in the arc of your week or related to your conference theme in particular. And also any experiences you've had working with staff. I know one thing, one piece of advice I would give is that, I'm always telling staff to find deans, ask them what they want for their evening program. I think oftentimes staff, all they need is just 1 or 2 words of direction, and it can make like the biggest difference, but oftentimes they're really afraid to approach a dean. So if you know who's doing your evening program, it's really great to be able to find them or find Amber or a coordinator that can point out these evening program people to you, and just like tell them quickly what your conference theme is, or like if you're really trying to calm the kids down tonight, or if you want to tire them out, or you want them to be thinking about something in particular. If you have any experiences trying to incorporate those aspects, I'd love to hear them. Go ahead.
Well, Christmas at Harvard's last year, we had 2 of our lovely staff members come in and pretend to be Luna and Xenophilius Lovegood, and they did story time with our kids, which both really, really jazzed them up and also really calmed them down. Not quite sure how that happened, but they were really excited to see staff members kind of take on our Harry Potter theme and come and tell some stories, and it was really awesome, and it was really informal, and they got dressed up, and it was a lot of fun. The kids really enjoyed it.
We try to do like a vesper service, and I actually bring in my counselors for that too, and give them the option to sign up to bring something, because they're not all necessarily feel comfortable doing that, but even just sharing a poem that means something to them, or a scripture, or just some part of them that reflects how they experience God in the world, to kind of like bring as like the last important thing. So that's give some back to the counselors to do, which is great.
And also, it's a good idea to do it by a bunk room too. If the kids are comfortable doing evening vespers or morning vespers, just to sign up by bunk room, if you have enough kids, because it gives them an opportunity to be creative together and get into that worship mindset together too.
We try to have a campfire every night that we possibly can, and we definitely communicate with staff, and we pretty much run it on our own because it is our vespers as well, and so maybe a counselor's taking over part of it. But we obviously need them to do the fire, and it's nice to have the staff to maybe teach them a new song that we don't necessarily know, or we wouldn't really know how to approach teaching it. And then we kind of take it from there. It's a nice dovetailing and a little bit of everybody working together.
I think fires are a particularly good opportunity to teach songs that you're interested in for worship as well. If you're not particularly musically talented or don't have that counselor in that realm, I think fires are a really good time to grab somebody from staff and have them work with the conferees to learn music for worship, or to explore, if you have a fire early in the week, to just explore as much camp music as possible, and then from there sort of narrow it down to what the kids' interests are and what you'd like to do for worship. Anyone else have experiences with night adventures or night hikes as they relate to working with staff?
Parachute's fun. I was doing that with Godsend for a long time. Actually, Margie started doing it with Circle of Friends a long time ago. But usually Tuesday night, we take the parachute out to the ball field after staff show and play with it with like glow sticks, and do all of the little kid, like 4th and 5th grader games with the high schoolers, like cat and mouse. We just do it at night, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. 7th and 8th graders really like to do it too, but it's really fun.
So 4th and 5th grade.
Yeah, staff ran it last year as a thing.
Yeah, that was a new thing last year for night adventures, and it went almost flawless. There were times that it did not go as well, but this year I do think that it's going to go very, very well, since we're going to be a little more prepared for it and a little more prepped and practiced. But I find that we are playing a lot of games in those night adventures with the parachute. We're playing a lot of games that are aimed for 4th and 5th graders, but we're playing them with all ages. We have not had any high school groups tell us it felt juvenile or anything like that. We've always had positive responses from those. So that's definitely, it can be very high energy at night. If you need that, we can do it for you, or it can be low key. We've had deans tell us what their focus point for the day was. Today was teamwork, so our staff will, okay, teamwork, great, and work with that and find, passing the glow-in-the-dark ball, games that we talk about what we found, where we found ourselves in teamwork today. Basic little things like that, where they get really excited that this really glowing ball is rolling towards them, but also that they get to talk about and affirm themselves and what they experienced that day. So, even a simple hint towards your staff, whoever is assigned to your night activity, even a one word is helpful to them to be able to just say those little things, to direct it the right way and get that focus. So I definitely encourage you to talk to them about what you'd like out of anything when it comes to those night activities. And same with night hikes. Night hikes have not been as popular lately, the last few years that I've noticed anyway. And we've had some groups that do it every year and have wonderful night hikes. So anyone who's open about night hikes but not sure and is curious about what that even means, please come talk to me, because we'd love to see some more night hikes happen.
Could you talk a little bit about what happens on a night
Night hikes, when we literally do take your entire conference through on a hike at night. So we are experiencing being outside and out in the wilderness differently than they really ever will. When they're up here in camp and they're walking around in the evening, there's lakes, there's paths, there's all these things, there's pavement, they can find their way, they're a little more used to it. This is where we kind of focus on teaching them the little skills that they don't always see during the day. So they'll learn sounds, sights, the way our eyes change, the way our scent changes at night, and we can smell things differently, and we go through all of these things with you. We've been working at the original night hikes. Forest did get a little destroyed a couple years ago, so it has opened up a lot more. It's not just a hike up and down the hill anymore, so if people think that's all it is not that anymore, so please think about it. And we can make a night hike last for an hour for you for the entire night activity time, or if you want a short one, we can do it short. We've done short 15-minute ones. So it's definitely a nice opportunity that a lot of kids don't go out in the woods at night, ever. So I rarely even do, and I live here all summer, so it's really just a different change of pace that a lot of the conferees, I'm noticing a trend, aren't getting the opportunity to do as often. So.
Amber?
Yeah.
I stopped taking night hikes because I had like 2 years in a row where the staff just got restless and were like, oh, it's not dark, we're not, and then they started before it was dark, and it was awkward, and
yeah,
so it wasn't a successful experience, and so I just said, well, this isn't a great evening program.
We definitely have to adapt a little bit depending on where your week falls in the summer. A night hike may be a twilight hike more than a night hike, because obviously we cannot keep your kids or ourselves up until it's 10:30 at night. Right. Sometimes it's dark. And we've had experiences where they have not gone as well, and I definitely think that one of the focus points for this summer is I really want to hear feedback about things like that. I want to hear about where you felt it was really great, where you felt it was struggling. And this goes with anything that had to do with night activities, staff activities, group games, anything like that. Because I want that feedback so we can have the staff more prepared, more trained, and I can really see what it was that was difficult. Because I don't always get to see all that. Staff will be like, oh, it was great. And then deans will be like,
No, it wasn't so good.
I'm like, oh, okay. So, I would like to hear about things like that so I can get our staff prepared to be able to handle whatever kind of situation might happen with that.
That idea of doing the night hike has got things turning in my brain, and almost everything that anybody does here relies on switching your perspective in some way. And it might be a neat idea to incorporate in order, it'd be up to you to do the same hike at night and during the day, and to use that as maybe even on different days at different times when they're at different places during the week. But to talk about just how a simple change can completely change your perspective on something, and I'm sure you can tie it to almost anything, what any of us are doing.
You've got me really excited about night hikes because I'm thinking about what a great opportunity to practice listening.
Yeah. It's It's unfortunate that I that I haven't seen as, it just hasn't been as popular, and I think that's one of the big focus points this summer is being out in nature being one of the big things for this summer, because anytime that we're keeping, in my opinion, no matter what your conference is, we are here, it's camp. We need to get outside and we need to experience the things the opportunities and experiences kids don't have any other place to have. And if taking a hike at night is something that, I'm an adult, I can go out in the woods anytime I want to, and yet I never go out in the woods at night. So if this is something we can do for these kids, an experience they're not going to get anywhere else, take advantage of it, because it might be the only time they're going to get to do that.
Well, maybe you're on a roll, and maybe it would be a good time to ask about stargazing. How does that work?
Stargazing can work all kinds of ways. Last year we had kind of a different flow for stargazing. We had some classic stargazing. Unfortunately, again, sometimes stargazing is skygazing because we don't quite have stars. One of the things I like to encourage about stargazing, we can talk about just about anything with your kids. If we see stars, we can point out constellations, we can tell stories about them. If we do not, we can create stories about them. We can tell them still classic constellation stories. If you give us a heads up on what your conference focuses on, we have some amazing storytellers on staff who will adapt whatever they see that night, whether it's a line of a tree to the stars in the sky to the clouds, and be able to create the story around it. They can be very conferee infused. They can get the kids very involved in this storytelling or stargazing as well, or they can completely leave it on their own. We also are very open-minded to taking stargazing to different parts of camp than, say, just the ball field. We've had really great ones happen on the deck of the Glen. We've had some really cool ones happen at fire pits that don't have fires happening. So I encourage, if you have some secret spot that you really enjoy, that you feel would be a good place to have some low-key nighttime stargazing story time, that's something we can do for you. Thinking outside the box with where you would like to have it can sometimes make all the difference between how much of an impact stargazing can make. The more stars that are out, the closer we get to true stargazing. I'll be real about that. So if there aren't stars there, we'll do the best we can for you without keeping your kids up till midnight. For you.
Is it the same staff? Do they specialize? My specific question is, you can't see stars, can it turn into a night hike?
It
Or is it different
can
people?
and cannot.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's pretty easy for me to adapt things like that, but I'm not there. So if there's, they're going to be pre-selected at who's going to be running your night activities. Changing them last minute can be difficult if there's other groups using those areas that are pre-planned. So having too many kids at one activity without enough staff, or just having the staff, not quite being prepared for that. Because if they come to do stargazing and then they want to do night hike, they will have to go get all of their tools and things for a night hike. So sometimes a little bit of a heads up is good. The earlier you can tell me any changes, the more likely it's going to go over nice and smooth for you. And changing things really last minute can be very, very difficult, because it is hard to track down everybody and make sure everybody has everything they need at the time that they need it, so we can get things going on a nice schedule for you.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, if you need to pull a staff member aside, that you usually have 2 people working each night activity, if you need to pull a staff member aside and say to them, hey, I don't know if this is really working. They probably notice if it's not working, but I don't know if this is working. Maybe we could play a game or something like that. Please feel free to do that with them. They will have enough training to be able to think of a game offhand. So let's hope anyway, or else they'll get trained again. So, but talk to them about that, because they'll be open-minded about switching things up and working with you, because they want to make you happy and they want your kids to be happy too.
And oftentimes they don't really know the expectations that you have. They just assume, well, they want a fire, they want stargazing, so I'm going to keep doing that regardless of anything.
Exactly.
So they're open to that right away, but the expectation is that they stick to exactly what they're told.
Right.
Remember we had stargazing last year and one of those not real starry nights and staff not real comfortable. And one of my counselors pulled out his iPad with an app that had, like when you waved it over the sky, it showed these are the stars you would see, and it had like all the names of the stars, and it showed the constellations, and the kids loved that, and it was really cool for them as far as getting a real handle on what stargazing part of it was. And I know we're not running to technology all the time, but since the staff were going, well, that might be the Big Dipper over there, but it's kind of a useful tool, whether through paper or app or something like that, but maybe to help our staff with stargazing. Some stargazing tools might be whether the technological ones or even an old-fashioned paper.
We do have Star Trek, yellow Star Trek on a ring.
I know we were talking about, tapping into our counselors' specific passions and talents and everything. I remember last year, I don't remember who it was now, but one of the staff members who did Tai Chi with our group right before a campfire.
Marcus.
Tony. And so
Oh,
it was,
Tony.
Mark, you're a counselor, Mark, right?
No, it was Tony.
Oh,
it was, yeah. And it was really neat because it was totally unexpected, totally unplanned, but we became aware that, he was doing this in the morning. We went, hey, would you be interested in doing this one evening? And it was right at dusk, and so it was getting really quiet, and then we went right to our campfire after that. It was a really neat, very different experience, and probably not necessarily going to be replicated this year, but something different like that. It was different. It was just really cool.
We have a counselor that does yoga. She's really into yoga, and she does that in the morning. We'll do like a journaling and yoga interest group, and they'll go out to the ball field and they'll do their yoga thing, and then they'll bring their journals and they'll write about it afterwards. And the kids really, really like doing that. And that can be a night thing or a morning thing.
Another thing we haven't really touched on, but in relation to your conference theme or your daily themes, in terms of maybe Missions Day or day, if you do a day of service or something like that, is to think about the sort of work projects that are available at camp. I know a lot of people think work projects and they'll immediately go to Greg, our site manager, to think about maybe buildings that need attention or if they can do something with the grounds or something like that. But there are pretty much opportunities to work with any part of staff here. Every part of staff could work with groups, smaller groups or larger groups out of your conference. I think one thing that comes to mind is that A-Team is down spreading chips to maintain their course, and that is a regular routine thing. And so if you have a group that might be interested in, they're really into ropes and they kind of want to see the inner workings of it, there's an opportunity there for that, not only a work group or a service project, but them to interact more with the staff on a level that's different than what they're used to being down there at ropes course. I think Amber mentioned sustainability and gardening. There's a lot of opportunity for work projects there, just beyond the regular interest group. Beyond it being just more of a classroom thing, there's also the sort of getting your hands dirty work group sort of aspect to being in the garden or sustainability. And I don't know do you know if Bake Shop is going to be offered again this year?
It will not be.
No? All right.
If you're in the Pines, you can run it yourself. I have done that in the past. Also really fun, Bob will give you all the stuff that you need to bake stuff. He'll give you everything.
Yes.
You just have to bring it over to the Pines and use the Pines oven and make sure that they don't die or burn themselves.
That is true. He will provide you with all kinds of icings and colored dyes and all kinds of fun stuff.
It's fun though, but you have to be in the Pines.
You have to be in the Pines. Yes. I don't know if the Glen has an oven that works. I don't know if it functions. But if it does, feel free to have some.
Yeah, it's fun.
And does anyone else have any sort of work project related stuff that they've done with their groups or?
We did a mural last year in the composting toilet.
That's beautiful.
And that was something that we talked a lot with Greg prior, because he was very particular. And again, there throughout the years, things have been painted on staff around camp, and they just want to make sure that they're keeping the integrity of the buildings when you do projects. But that was really awesome, and we were able to get all of the conferences involved with that. So if you have counselors, staff, kids that are really creative, and that was something we didn't plan. We kind of saw our group and thought, hey, this would be a great thing, and kind of switched up some of our programming so we could do it. But it was really awesome, and our kids had a great experience, and now they can come back every year and say, hey, I did that. And even kids that were there that week could say, hey, that's one of my words, or that's something that I put down, and feel a part of it. So that was really cool, but definitely go through all of the channels of communication before you pick up the paintbrush.
I guess if no one has anything else, please feel free to talk to myself or to Amber this weekend. If you have any more questions about evening program or working with staff in particular, if you have had any issues with staff or success stories with staff, I'd love to hear them, since we're going to sort of be ushering this last year's camp family into learning how to work with teams, and I'd like to hear any feedback possible, so I appreciate it.